for women in diplomacy, very similar to women in business all over the place. It's really about making conscious choices and kind of thinking about what your priorities are at what time, so that you can kind of have the same opportunities to advance and try to kind of break down more of those barriers for women in senior leadership roles.
Of course.
You have to keep setting these bigger goals and pushing yourself beyond maybe even what you totally feel comfortable with, but really kind of being proactive and thinking about where you want to go and what you really want to do so that you can kind of aim higher. Because you'll never get to 100%, but if you keep your ambitions low, it's going to keep you down even further. So really just kind of pushing more and trying to kind of move along.
So, women operating within the planes of entrepreneurship, also known as women in business or business women. What a big topic we have today. And I'm not going to be talking here alone. I have my beloved guest that I'm super honored to have you here today. We have Megan Naylor, a senior economic officer for the U.S. Embassy. Please welcome.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
We have awesome women in diplomacy, and we're enchanted to have you today. Can we please start talking about what led you to diplomacy? What motivated you to work in diplomacy, and how did you get started, pretty much?
Yeah, so it was not my childhood dream to be a diplomat. I grew up in Texas and honestly never even thought about or knew anything about international relations or foreign policy. And I started out working on economic development in the United States, and went to graduate school where I did a master's in business administration and also another master's degree focused on economic development. And I really wanted to learn how to do things better for the United States. And in happenstance, I met someone who was really interested in a career in the Foreign Service. And I kind of learned about how the U.S. works overseas, and it just became this really interesting opportunity. And honestly, it was not something I ever really wanted to do, but that person I met was the person who became my husband. And so I found myself, as I was finishing my MBA, in a situation where we were moving to Liberia in West Africa, and I had just invested a lot of money in my education, and all of my classmates and peers were going on to work in VP level jobs in corporate America, and I was moving to a post-conflict country without running water and electricity, and it led to a lot of soul searching and kind of thinking about what I wanted to do next. And by kind of happenstance, I ended up working at the embassy, and I was what was called a public affairs officer, so doing kind of the communications for the embassy and talking about our priority issues there. And we had our ambassador there was Linda Thomas Greenfield, and she's currently the United States ambassador to the United Nations. And she has this like wonderful, amazing personality, and is full of so much energy and is so authentic and engaging. And working for her really kind of opened my eyes that someone can very much be themselves and be a diplomat, and really kind of build on relationships and communication and do very interesting work. And so through that, I ended up deciding I too would become a diplomat. And we have served since then in addition to Liberia, we were in Argentina, Kosovo, Estonia, Washington, and now here in Slovakia.
So love literally flew you through the ocean, over the seas, right?
Yes, which is kind of crazy, and it's not something I ever expected, but I think for me, one of the really important things is just being open to really interesting opportunities and building like a strong skill set that you can use in different places at different times. And I think my kind of more diverse background, having done more of like a business background, was actually really useful coming into the Foreign Service. So it's been
awesome. Great. That's a beautiful story. Actually, a beautiful love story and work story, and the fact that it's all connected, I love it. And now you are a working woman in diplomacy. What I would love to be interested in is, like, have you ever faced any difficulties connected to your gender? Because in Slovakia, for example, when we hear diplomacy, the first thing we have in mind are men in suits.
Yeah.
What is it like from your point of view? Have you faced any challenges?
Well, it's such an interesting question because as a woman in the diplomacy today, working for the United States government, I kind of see myself as someone who is meant to be there, that my place and my position is appropriate. But as recently as the late 1960s, the United States government actually had a rule for women diplomats that if they got married, they couldn't have their job anymore. Wow. And it was only as a result of a lawsuit. One of the diplomats sued and said, this is discrimination. I should be allowed to be married and be a diplomat. And it took about 30 years for our organization, which is called the U.S. Department of State, which is the same as like the Slovak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to really change the rules and try to level the playing field for women. And today, the statistics are about 40% of American diplomats are women, and only about 30% of American ambassadors are women. And I think those statistics are kind of similar to what you would see in corporations as well, where we have a lot more women today in business and diplomacy, but at the higher levels, there's still a gap. And so I think that is still a real challenge, and that has to do with kind of institutional barriers and some of the life challenges as well for people, where you kind of have to balance work and family and make trade-offs that men don't always have to make, or it's easier for them and more socially acceptable to let their wife stay home, or to have them prioritize taking care of kids and doing things along those lines. So I think for women in diplomacy, very similar to women in business all over the place, it's really about making conscious choices and kind of thinking about what your priorities are at what time, so that you can kind of have the same opportunities to advance and try to kind of break down more of those barriers for women in senior leadership roles.
Of course. There's actually our organization as Women in Action, and also kind of dug into this topic of women on leading positions, that of course women in general do gain little money, or like they actually have lower salaries than men in general, but it's also because women opt for jobs that are not so well paid. But when it comes to leading positions, we still don't have enough women in these leading positions, and I believe that's also what you mentioned, that we need to kind of get them there. Do you think, how is it possible to kind of, when we talk about women in diplomacy or in business, how can we enhance them to kind of reach for higher positions, the leading positions? Because overall now there is only 34% of women who are in leading positions worldwide. That's super low number when it comes to in comparison with almost 70% of men in leading positions.
Yeah. The stats are very telling there. I'm actually reading a book right now that one of my professors in business school wrote. Her name's Alison Fergale, and she wrote this wonderful new book that's called Likeable Badass. And it's about how women can advance in business, and it really focuses on these kind of dual aspects of really getting ahead. You need to both be able to convey warmth and assertiveness, and finding the right balance between those two, so that you can get ahead and people will like you and trust you and have confidence in your abilities, but not kind of fall into the traps of being the helpful person, or the person who's not really seen as advancing business outcomes. But one of the things she talks about in that book is setting what she calls like big, hairy, audacious goals, and the idea that no one is ever going to get 100% of what they want. And so if all you say is, I want to, get a $20,000 bonus when I sign on to something, and you're not, from your peers that others have gotten bonuses along those lines, and
of course
you think you could probably do it, but you're not quite sure. And somebody else goes out and sets a goal of they want a $40,000 bonus for the same thing. Maybe the person who is negotiating with you on the other side has a max that they can give of $25,000.
Okay.
So if $20,000 is your goal and $25,000 is his max, but his goal is to keep it as low as he can, right?
Yes.
Like you might end up with $22,000 or something like that, and you'll feel like, oh, I exceeded my goal, that's great.
Yes.
But for the person who's kind of pursuing that bigger goal and thinks that they're worth it and wants to go and do something more, they actually one, probably end up with a higher amount on that bonus or whatever it is they're trying to get. But two, they actually sometimes probably feel a little more disappointed because they think, oh, I didn't get the 40,000 or I didn't get that promotion or whatever it is I want. But the idea that you have to keep setting these bigger goals and pushing yourself beyond maybe even what you totally feel comfortable with, but really kind of being proactive and thinking about where you want to go and what you really want to do so that you can kind of aim higher. Because you'll never get to 100%, but if you keep your ambitions low, it's going to keep you down even further. So really just kind of pushing more and trying to kind of move along. And I think that works for all of us, but it's hard to do when you kind of get into the day-to-day and thinking about, it's not just the negotiation, but what's your, dynamics with your coworkers or where you want to go for your next position and things like that.
So it's pretty much about enhancing the right skills when it comes to aiming for higher positions or better salary. And talking about skills, for example, what are the top tier skills that women have that men do tend to lack when it comes to business and careers? What do you think, what's the women advantage that we have simply in our professional lives?
I think a lot of it comes down to kind of communication skills and being able to build relationships. I think that women leaders tend to create more inclusive teams where they invest a bit more in the relationships and people are able to work together more towards those bigger goals for the organization. I think you see that in business and diplomacy. And really, in both of our fields, so much of what you're doing is about making relationships and selling either an idea or a product and convincing someone why your way is what they want to pursue. And I think really women excel at kind of that emotional intelligence and figuring out what those commonalities are and where there are aspects that we can really connect to drive things forward. So the EQ, the empathy that women tend to have and do have is like their key force, I believe. That's what they, That's awesome. That's a really nice answer. And what about simply the women support? Is future really female? How can we support women? How would you enhance your colleagues? How would you support them to continue even though they might be struggling at the first maybe months of their work? What's your go-to support you would provide to your colleague? I mean, I think really just providing mentorship and allyship, right? Being there for people both to kind of help them understand that sometimes things are systematically kind of stacked against women. And it is a higher burden to succeed sometimes. But also it's not you as the individual, it's the system, and we can support each other as we work against that. And so I think, it's so important for women to support each other in the workplace. And, I think can be a history sometimes of women in senior roles kind of not wanting to be seen like a woman or not wanting to be like a man, more, assertive and getting things done and more ruthless. And I think we're kind of seeing over time that actually having that empathy and showing some vulnerability while also showing that you can make the tough decisions and you can support people and really being a model for others of how they can do that as well.
Of course. So lead the people and give them a good example, set the examples. When we talk about the examples, currently I kind of dedicate a little bit of my time into the topic on different genders and rather to say different age groups in one work field, for example. Is there any way you would support young women into indulging in diplomacy? How is the environment for young girls or especially young people, Gen Zs, millennials in diplomacy? What does it feel like?
It's an interesting question. And so I'm on LinkedIn and I always get, kind of random inquiries from people who maybe attended one of the universities I went to or have other connections who are really interested in diplomacy and want to talk. And I'm always happy to talk to them and kind of talk about my experience and what things have been like. And one of the things I always stress is diplomacy is something that sounds really cool and interesting.
It sure does.
And it can be and often is, but also it's something where you're moving every couple years and you're uprooting yourself and your family, and it can be harder to build relationships, particularly as a woman. I have so many colleagues who Men, it's much easier for them to go overseas and meet a wife who will travel around with them. It's a vast generalization, but it is much harder and much less frequent that you see women diplomats meet their husband overseas and have that person follow them. And so those like kind of differing gender standards are still very impactful, I think, for people. But also, organizational cultures are kind of interesting sometimes. And I think in our organization, historically, it's been very like male. There's an expression, male, pale, and Yale, to describe American diplomats, which is to say typically they have been in the past white men who attended like prestigious universities. And so really as an organization, we've tried to diversify a lot and bring in different perspectives. And also with that though, I think we're trying to bring in more of a different perspective on having work-life balance and, making time for people to be people. And so really it's I think a struggle that can be more challenging for the younger generations who have more probably reasonable expectations of when their day should end and what their employer should expect for them. And it's funny because sometimes you're like, is this actually like a national security emergency? Is this a crisis that is going to affect the security of the world? Or is this just a problem for today? And trying to find the balance between those two things is
awesome. You make it sound super attractive. Like you make me feel like I want to change my field. Oh, love that. Okay, and now you mentioned also the work-life balance. How do you balance it out? Do you have any special tricks? Because I believe you have to work a lot. So.
Yes, I think honestly for me it involves both, active work with my partner to balance out our schedules so that one of us can be there. We have 2 kids who are young, and so somebody needs to be around, or when someone's sick, to kind of cover for that. But a lot of it too is kind of outsourcing help, right? And recognizing the value of your time. And so if that means, having childcare or a nanny, or having someone who can, come help clean your house so that you can spend the time that you have with your family, actually with your family. But I mean, at the same time as well, there's constant choices. Like last night, for example, there was a diplomatic community gathering that I really wanted to attend, but also at the last minute, I'd gotten notice that my children's school was having a bake sale today. And so it's that question of like, I really want to go to that, but I think my kids actually really need this. And even though I love to bake and I'd like to make something really complicated and fabulous, maybe we'll just let the kids help us make some brownies from Brownie Mix, right? Where they feel like they're doing it, but it's taken us a small chunk of time, and really kind of just being conscious about those choices of the kids aren't going to remember like how lovely their baked goods are, and having that time for the experience, or on some days saying, okay, we can buy some cupcakes for you to take, or whatever it is.
And they wouldn't mind.
Not at all, exactly. And that's, I think, the constant struggle and, challenge is really kind of picking where you want to prioritize your time so that you can spend it in ways that, have meaning for you.
So not only you're a diplomat, but first of all, I believe you're a mother, and you have to kind of always have that and always take it into consideration that you want to be here for your kids and then for your country, or trying to find a balance in between them.
Yeah, and I think that's true as well, even for my colleagues who don't have children, where they should have time to go, pursue their hobbies and their interests and relax and not have to work all the time. And so I think really trying to be conscious about setting boundaries to when you're going to work, and particularly like when you're going to look at your phone in the evenings, because the work email for me is always there, and when you have colleagues in different time zones who come to you with questions at different times of the day, you really have to be conscious about where you set those limits, and
So you need to find a balance into it.
Yeah.
It's all about the balance and choosing and spending your time wisely, I believe. Yeah, awesome. And now maybe let's move on a little bit to like a little different way. Let's talk about strong leaders, especially female women leaders in diplomacy, business, worldwide. The field does not really, there is not really point into picking one particular field, because we talk about any leaders overall. What do you think are what makes a strong female leader? What is it for you? If you, for example, have your supervisor who would be female, what are the qualities you would be looking up to? You would be like, wow, you are a good leader. What is it that makes you say it?
For me, it's someone who knows their field, knows the issues that matter to them, who invest in their people and kind of build relationships and really understand what drives their team, and kind of have some degree of warmth with that, right? And a sense that they care about you as a person and as a professional, and then a person who gets things done and knows how to advance priorities. And so that kind of confidence and ability to assert themselves, I think that makes a really effective leader.
Awesome. And now, from the other point of view, what would you say is the quality or a skill that leaders tend to have and they should not be having it? Like, what is it that you kind of mind sometimes about your leaders? Is there anything that you're like...
That's a tough question. I mean, I think I have seen some leaders in the past who maybe take a lot of credit for what their team is doing, but aren't as involved in supporting the team. And I think that's something that kind of disappoints me, to see people like that rise up who, are really kind of resting on the coattails of everyone beneath them, and not actually promoting those people and supporting them and helping them develop their careers. So,
Okay, so taking credit for what they literally had not done. Yes. Awesome. And then, do you have, or are there any role models who inspired you particularly along your way?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, working for Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield was really impactful for me. She's known for she's from Louisiana and grew up in the segregated South, and then went on to become an ambassador and has worked in multiple countries and is now leading our efforts at the United Nations. And she's famous for what's known as gumbo diplomacy, and that is bringing people together to actually cook a big pot of this Louisiana stew, and really using that as an opportunity to connect with people and build personal relationships and warmth that allows her to really advance shared priorities and move the needle on things. And so she's always struck me for her really just huge spirit and kindness that she combines with just amazing intellect and insights and ability to motivate teams and pull them together.
That's beautiful.
So
That's beautiful.
she's amazing. And then I've worked with several other women who similarly just really value their teams and their mentorship and want to invest in the next generation. And I think that's so important and really impactful.
Awesome. And now the last kind of topic we will dig into will be how did the role of women changed over the time. So there is a typical stereotype where, as we mentioned it, and as you mentioned it also, it is totally normal for women to follow their husbands. Whatever husband's work requires, women tend to follow, because there is this role where women are first of all mothers and they want to take care of the family and take care of the husband, while the husband provides the financial side. But this role has changed a lot, and it's been changing, and it's constantly changing, I would say. How do you perceive this? Is this what we mentioned changing? Are also women providing the families financially? Are men more taking care of their families? Do men cook? Do men do laundry? I don't know. Do they clean the houses? Not only in business, but in lives, in a common life. How is it changing for you?
I mean, I think it's hugely different all over the world. And certainly in my household, my husband cooks and does laundry and does all of these things because we are partners, though. And I think that comes from a place of privilege, right? To be able to have that expectation that your partner will join you and kind of contribute equally to the household. I think still women carry much more of like the burden of like emotional labor and kind of that invisible work of thinking about, you know, what size clothing do the kids need, and who's going to need new shoes, and when's the next doctor's appointment, and things like that. I think the data is really clear that women are still doing so much more of that work, and that it is a lot of work. But at the same time, I think increasingly people are realizing that you know, partners need to support each other.
Of course.
And certainly I think that's the case here in Europe and in the US, where there's kind of a trend towards that. And in other countries, I think, and you know, developing countries, that the dynamics are so very different, but we are seeing more and more women going into business, and more women kind of seeing that they have the potential to be entrepreneurs, and they have the ability to start small and grow businesses and support their families and their communities. And there's kind of, I would say, an increasing global recognition that women are the drivers of the economy, and women can support, you know, growth and development. And so, you know, we do a lot of programs as the U.S. government of trying to support women in entrepreneurship, particularly in developing countries or places where there's not much of a history of that. And so much of that is really just kind of reaching out to girls when they're young to let them know they can do something. They can do, you know, they have the potential. So I think it's interesting to see how those things are changing.
Yeah, it is. And it's also like a big thing for me throughout the generations, because I believe, for example, my grandpa would not be even able to find kitchen in the house. My father, I've never seen him cooking, never. But in my household, from the younger generation of my family, it is totally normal that if one partner cooks, the other one will clean the kitchen, and vice versa, and we do it. And it's also, I believe that young people are actually having in mind that it is okay to share the household and share all of the chores and share housework and everything you need to do around it, and that is not like stereotypically given that this is female's job and this is male job. That's what I love. That's also like the realization of the Gen Zs, for example. Yeah,
and I think it's so important too for like women to be active in that. I have two sons who are 4 and 8, and I was telling you about making brownies last night.
Yes.
Because they need to know how to do those things, and they need to, you know, you have to start from an early age showing like this is normal. Men cook, men clean, they help fold the laundry, they do all of these things. And so involving your kids so that they kind of grow up with the expectation that that's something that's normal and appropriate that they should be doing, and kind of modeling what you want to see for them in their future too.
Of course, be a role model yourself. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. I loved most of your thoughts that you say, and I was completely agreeing with most of them. Thank you for finding time for us. Fingers crossed in your diplomacy career. You are a big inspiration for me, seeing you as younger generation, seeing that women do work in diplomacy and they can have strong opinions is a huge, and that is, I love that, because it's not always possible to have the strong opinion as women, especially in Eastern country, in Slavic country as Slovakia is. So thank you so much for bringing this approach. Thank you.
Thank you.